This conference will now be recorded.
And we're live.
All right, I think might as well start it up, right? Go for it.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. Christine, Mauricio, Ryan. Small group today, but that's quite all right. Anish, you want me to get started, or you want to?
No, go for it.
Okay, cool. So this is sort of our second Grasshopper work section. I think it was Christine Song and some others that were asking about something that's called the heads-up display, or HUD as an acronym. And basically what that does is it's a toolkit. I think it was made by some folks at MIT, and it allows to do sort of a visual display in your Rhino workspace so that you can visualize your data in real time without having to go back and forth between like the Grasshopper canvas and your Rhino display platform. So I'm going to show you just like a real basic way to visualize some data. We were thinking like window to wall ratio would be a cool idea. And I'll show you how to use like a set of these tools, and they're totally customizable where you can make them your own or copy and paste them. So I'm going to jump over to my work computer, which is I hope what you can see on screen. And this part of the script is just sort of a stripped down version of what we did off of a single surface. So what you see in black are the grid lines, and that's based on a number of divisions in the U and V direction, and what we were calling quad panels. And those are from the Lunchbox toolkit. So we're just going to keep adding to that, and I'll just kind of talk as I go and try to explain what I'm up to. If you have questions or anything, you can put them in the chat. You can ask whatever feels good. I'm going to double click again, and this is where you can start to search different tools. I'm going to go to something called panel frame. That's also from the Lunchbox component. The inputs are a scale factor and the word panel, and we can take our panels directly out of our quads and plug it right in. So this is sort of an easy division for glazing and solids, let's say. And I'm just going to put a number slider at the beginning of this to control the scale. I'm going to double click. I'll turn it into a double decimal place. We can go from, let's say, 0.01 to a full scale of 1.
Tom, could you take like maybe like 30 seconds to go over the previous stuff, what was going on with the rectangle and the UV stuff, just for the people that might have not?
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing we did, as you can see in our layer structure, is we drew a surface. So this blue rectangle standing vertical is a surface, and we just did that by drawing a line, extruding that curve vertically to a very specific dimension and length and width. In Grasshopper, we brought up a node called surface, and we right-clicked, and we said set one surface, and we were able to select that blue rectangle. What we wanted to do to the rectangle was sort of divide it into panels, and we were thinking about a facade treatment. So we said we could do that in a couple different ways. One was with grid, and the grid is taking the input of the surface, it's dividing it in U and V, and in this case, it's sort of X and Z, up and down, and left to right. The U divisions are 12 and 3 in the vertical. But of course, if I play with the number slider, you can see that all starts to change very rapidly. I'm going to go back to double clicking in 3. And that also surface that picked up in the quads node. Both of these are different ways to divide. Quads gives you sort of a panel that has a surface area, where this is just lines, and that's where the output says panels. We're using the same U and V to divide it the same way, and this preview is sort of just a graphic thing that we were doing, and we were adding a swatch to turn color of that graphic to be black so you could see it. So I can select the surface, and I'm just going to type hide. So we actually don't really need it. It's just sort of in the background as the base geometry or the primitive for what we're going to do with all the information we can extract from the surface. Here is sort of the output, and it's just showing that it's a lot of different trimmed surfaces. To be exact, it's 36, counting integer 0. So we're going to take all those panels now and start to divide them or subdivide them again. I'm just going to put it in a scale factor of 0.5, but if you were to scale this higher or lower, you can sort of see that that opening gets larger or smaller. I don't really like the graphics, so I'm going to add new graphics as previews. I'm going to copy and paste, Control C, Control V. Double clicking, I can call a color swatch. And maybe the frame, I want to be something like a dark brown. Maybe it's a terracotta. And then for the panel itself, maybe I want something that's more of a glass color, maybe like a light blue. I'll just say accept. Put those swatches into the materials. I can take the output, which is frames, and also the panels, and now I sort of have this new graphic. I'll go a little bit more blue. Anytime you have a node, you can right-click it, and there's a preview for it. So I can just turn that preview off, and now all we see is the grid lines from the beginning of the script, and also the previews for each one of these elements. And again, if I play with the scale, all that stuff moves together, right? Which is kind of a cool way to give graphic coloration to your diagrams. From the frame, we're gonna try to extract all the areas of each because we want to compare the glazing to the overall square footage or square area of the wall panel itself. I'm going to copy and paste that as well. And I'll take the frame geometries and the panel geometries. And what you start to see is that centroid of area in the area nodes just automatic preview. For there, I would like to add all of the information that comes out of that. So I'm just going to show the information with a panel. So if I take the areas, we can see that there's all these areas. They're all the same, and it's of the 36 different panels. Just copy and paste and replace this wire with that one, and we can see that the areas are different for obviously the panel versus the frame, or the solid and the glazing. Well, what I really want to do is add all those numbers together. So that I can start to divide them and make a ratio for window to wall ratio. So there's a command called mass addition, which will take all the numbers in a list and add them together. I'll copy and paste that, and I'll do that for both. Double click and get another panel and start to visualize that result and make sure it worked. And I'll do the same thing here. It's a good way to just double check your math and your logic to make sure it's working the way you think it is. So those are the additions, and we're going to go into something I like to do, which is like a rounding function. So I'm just going to say custom round, and there's a value down here for the scope of the rounding, and think of it like truncating decimal points. If I right click, I can set a number, and I can say let's just do 0.1. Commit the changes. I'm going to paste that as well because I want the same one below. And we get the result of the addition. The addition before it was 2257.92. And if it truncates properly, it'll just go down to 0.9, right? Great. There's another panel. Replace the data. So from here, we've successfully added all of the blue square footages and all of the orange square footages, or glass and solid. And we want to create sort of a ratio that goes along with it. So it's a division to do that initially. And we're basically going to divide the total square area of the length and width of this surface. So that comes from all the way back here, right? The initial surface. So what I'd like to do is do another area and take the total surface area. And I'm kind of clicking and using my center mouse wheel to do all those things all at once as a way to navigate the Grasshopper canvas. So we have area here, and we're going to put it into the B slot. It's A divided by B. A is the solid, or I'm sorry, the glass area, and B is the total area. Let's see that result as a panel. And let's check that out. So right now we're at a window to wall ratio of, let's say, 0.46. If I multiply that by 100, another way to get a very specific value in a panel, you can use quotes and then type what you want. Could say anything. I'm just going to type 100 and it gives me something that says 100. Multiply that. Do one more panel to see the output. And here we are at something like 46%. So my goal now is to not have to look at Grasshopper. And while I make design changes here, whether it's the shape of the wall, I want to twist it and bend it, because you know I love to do that and get like really weird shapes. And I want to see what that does to like a window to wall ratio if I were to change the UV count, the size of the wall, even the scale of the openings. Because if I do this, I really can't see now, you know, what that window to wall ratio calculation is. Maybe I want to target a number like 20%. So we have a value, and we want to project that value onto the screen, so to speak. So think about this like you're putting on one of the, like a futuristic set of like Apple glasses or something, and you're able to see all these things. Excuse me. You're able to see all these things sort of in your peripheral view. So here's a toolkit up here. If I hover over it, it's called Proving Ground. It also says HUD, and it's got all these really cool ways of displaying your viewport and your boundary. I'm going to start at the end and sort of work my way backwards, and that's pretty important for this set of tools. So I'm going to get the heads-up display node, and I'm going to work my way from here backwards to my numbers. We just grab all this stuff, and I can put it into place. I'm going to do a Control-G, which keeps it as a group. So we can say, okay, this was our surface to panels function. And here, if I right click, there's a little spot where you can type a note, and maybe we want to call that window to wall ratio calculations. So you know exactly what that is, and there it is. You zoom in. And now cleanly we can start to build on the rest of this thing. So the HUD, really cool thing. There's options here for to figure out sort of the boundaries of your screen, or your viewport here in perspective is the one that I'm using. All right, so I'm looking for boundaries or bounds. It's called Get Viewport Boundaries. There's also here, Get Viewport Boundary Dimensions. Okay. And you can see that the bounds and the bounds can go into each other. That's what it's looking for. Whether or not I want to show something, as if I hover again, it'll tell me like what it's looking for. It says it's a toggle for showing the heads-up display. Right now it's set to false. If I want to set it to true, there's a kind of a toggle switch called Boolean toggle, where now it says false. And if I double click on it, it'll set it to true. Right? So true is on and false is off. And there's also the draw object. So that's sort of what do you want to draw, or what do you want to project or show in the heads-up display. We don't have anything yet, and that's sort of what we're building. But eventually we're going to connect some things in there and tell it to draw or show them with this true function. So in the bounds, it's asking, you can refresh the bounds. My screen, your screen, the office computer monitors, they're all a little bit different in terms of their ratio. So if you get into one of these and you need to refresh your boundary, we're going to use something called a button. And what that does is just sort of takes a fresh look at what your ratio is and sets it up in the screen. Okay? So you can see, like, this isn't live, but it comes straight from the bounds. That's sort of the length and width ratio of my perspective viewport. Some of it's hidden by Grasshopper right now. The origin is sort of like where it's drawing it from, and you can see that it's locally defined as 0, 0, 0, or the actual origin, and that's this point right here, right? And then the scale is at 0.25 right now. It's all relative to itself, so it doesn't necessarily matter, but I'm just going to go ahead and make it a 1-to-1 scale so that I can see all of, see how that's actually the size of my monitor. And from there, moving backwards, we're going to put a bunch of stuff into draw objects. So I'm going to put in a merge node, which is going to take all of my results from all the stuff I want to show, and I can plug it straight into there. And as I start to input things, there'll become infinite number of things to be available. So there's only 2 right now, but as soon as I use a few, it'll give me 3, 4, 5, and so on. You'll see that happen. So we're going to use that for later. That's all set up to show things, and now we got to give it some information. So there's a few different things that you can show. Today we're going to show you how to draw just text objects in terms of, let's say it's a title for a chart, something like window to wall ratio. We're going to be able to take values from the calculations we just did in the front end and project them onto the screen just as the actual number. We're going to show you how to make a pie chart and also a bar chart. And then Anish is going to show us how to make like custom graphics using Grasshopper solely, and now without the use of some of these tools, which is super cool. So I'm just going to get the HUD text or the draw text node. You'll see it's HUD text. Okay, and this is a good stopping point to go over into Rhino space behind and start a new layer. And I'm just going to call it HUD bounds. I'm going to draw those in, let's say, like a red color. So every time we put a heads up display object, it's going to say, well, where do you want to draw it? And one of the easiest things to do is to say, well, let's draw a curve. So under geometry, and you can do curve and it's curve, or you can double click and tap curve. And I'll show it as well. A couple different ways to do the same thing. And then it'll say, well, what type of text do you want to read? And I'm going to just do, again, quote. I'm going to say window wall ratio as, let's say, a percentage. And that'll be sort of the text I want to show on screen. Some of these other things, like order through color and verticality, and that's sort of the organization of your text, whether it's horizontal or vertical. There's a lot more that you can go into, sort of endless. So we'll just kind of try to keep it simple and get some things to display. So right now, I still haven't set a curve for where I want this object. I'm going to go ahead and go into top-down view, where I can see that whole thing. And I'm going to get my rectangle tool here in Rhino, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle. And I'm going to click it. I'm going to go into Grasshopper and right click and set one curve. And so now I've given a location using this rectangle inside of my screen viewport, and everything looks good. It wants to draw that object, and I'll drop it into the merge. And right away you see here, which is not a live object, and it stays with me no matter where I go, but I can always move it. Right? And I can even scale it. So maybe I like that. I like the placement of it. Let's move it off to the side. And really what I want to do is maybe project that value from that calculation right up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this and I'm going to copy and paste it. Just bring it below itself. I'm going to right click on bounds and say disconnect that curve because I want another one. Oh, not that one, just a curve. And maybe I'll draw another rectangle just above it. And I can move it so it's nice and centered on that object. And I'll set that as the curve I want. Well, I don't want text. I want it to read the value of that calculation. So I'll go to that calculation. This should say 54.75. I think I'm going to do another rounding function because I don't need all those decimal places. Custom round. I can't type it. There we go. Right click again, set a number. do, again, 0.1. Now we've rounded that, and we can plug that right into what says text. Everything goes light gray instead of orange, and we can merge that. And I'm going to go ahead and flatten that. Pardon. That was a command to take all the merged objects. I right-click and I went to flatten, and that way it doesn't see it as sort of a list. It sees it all in one list, and it can display everything all at one time instead of it being broken into different segments or chunks. So that's pretty important. Otherwise, you only get one at a time. All right. So again, I can sort of then go back to, let's say, like the scaling function or something. And as I change geometry, I can really target like a 20% window to wall ratio. I don't even know what that looks like, but I'd love to know. So we go back in and see our geometry. Something like that is 20%. Oops, sorry. And if I go back into Grasshopper, which pop down here, and we'll go to the end, and let's keep building. I was going to build a pie chart next, so I want to label my pie chart. I'm going to take these two objects, copy and paste them, bring them down. Let's say window, let's say versus wall, and let's say it's in feet squared, because that's the units of measure in my document. I'm going to get a new curve. That in there, go back into the top view. I'll just take this one and I'll copy it down now. I'll click it, right click in Grasshopper and set that curve. And I'm just going to make that. And we can draw that object. And all of a sudden you can see that we're starting to build kind of this strip of information that we can always see live as we do things in our design space. I'm going to stop there for just a second and show another tool before we start drawing more objects. It's kind of another graphic thing, which is really nice, and it's called Conduit Font. And you'll notice that there's sort of this font at each bottom of these text objects, and we can really control that if we want, down to sort of the font type, if you wanted to get creative with maybe something like Scala Sans, which we all know and love, right? We can associate sort of a height to it. If you want to be taller or shorter, there's spacing, there's things you can do with bold or italics. So maybe I'll do like a Boolean toggle. So I want the bold to be true. And maybe for the typeface of my titles, I want something like that, right? So you saw those change. And we can do cool stuff like something like Magneto, which is very strange, right? And even something simple. So all sorts of stuff can happen in the font, and you can really get creative with how this looks. So if you wanted to go into, you know, a really pretty rendered view or something, or an Arctic view, and rip screenshots, or if you wanted to kind of fly around this live with a client or your colleagues, you could do so, make design changes, get live feedback. It looks really cool. I think it makes us look pretty smart, and it's kind of a lot of fun to design in that way. So we'll just pull that back off to the side. We can use it or not. And I'm going to start now going through the actual pie chart since we have this object. So back up to the HUD, draw a pie chart. Here's a pie chart. Not that crazy, right? It doesn't look, it's actually much simpler than like a text object. So I'm going to say the bounds again is a curve. The labels and the data will come from the calculations we had done. So in Rhino space, I'll copy this one down again. And we'll make that the curve that sets the location of the pie chart. For the labels, I think we want to do the numbers. that we got from A and B, let's say. So here's solids to labels. I'm also going to take that same thing into data because that's the data it's going to read. And then I want to go down and take the glazing, and I'm going to hold Shift, and you'll see a little green plus pop up, and that means I can add 2 wires into the same node. If I don't do that, it will release the old one and only keep the new one. But I want 2 different labels. I can keep adding and adding and adding to that. And I also want 2 sets of data. There's a pie style. I think I was going to skip the style for now. There's a lot of different styles, or can I do that? I cannot do that. I apologize. That is not correct. I am going to do a style, and it's going to make it look really cool. Here's a conduit pie style, similar to something like the font or the text where you can change the graphic output. Let's say the inner radius, let's do a number slider. You can also do a number slider for the outer radius. This will make sense shortly. There's a label radius, a font type, a height, and a color as well. So that's the pie style, and we'll set that up. And then the palette, which are colors basically. And I'm going to do another merge node to get some of the colors I like from my previews, which are all the way back here too. So if I change this color, it's going to change everything that is associated with that color. So there's the red and the blue. And that's not going to work because I'm skipping a step. Apologies, this is all very linear. So there's a color palette that you can do. Conduit color palette. Great. And that's where I would have to, merge those 2 colors into colors. And that becomes the palette. Color 1.
Yeah, Tom, maybe you want to show like using merge even on the 2 data points, right? Because when people get to like 2, 3, 4 things of data, that's where you want to use that merge node to manage all those different things coming together.
Yeah, here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me go to disconnect all. I'm just right clicking. I'm going to disconnect all the data. And as you suggested, good suggestion, to merge the data. And it's just sort of that intermediate step to keep things nice and clean and organized. A couple inputs and a single output. So you don't need to use shift or anything like that. And there we are. And if we did everything properly, we can draw those objects as well into D4. And now we have a cool pie chart, right? And I'm gonna start to scale it, kind of put it where I want it visually. I can then take the box, which is the text of my title, and start to move that. And then let's go to the sort of options. We say here's the inner radius, can get smaller or larger as you see fit. There's the outer radius. And then the label radius. So I can put the label sort of on or outside or in between. Maybe I'll just go outside. And it's looking pretty good. Move this over. So it's kind of like setting up a style, something you like, something that you might want to use over and over again for your projects. It definitely does not have to look like mine. Again, we only have 2 pieces of information in this pie chart, but you could have hundreds, you could have thousands. There really isn't any limit except for how like crazy and messy it might look after you put 1,000 pieces of information there. But we're getting pretty close to be able to make design changes and just see that stuff live. So I always love to go back and see if it's working. So as we go, you can see the square footages and all the window to wall ratio changing all at once. Right? Great. From there, we're going to make one last chart before I hand it over to Anish. I know I'm going as fast as I can. Draw text again for HUD text. I was going to do a bar chart, so a conduit chart. Great. Each one needs a curve or a boundary. Text objects here, I'm just going to say bar chart. I think you get the idea. I'm going to use the same font typeface because it's a title. And I'm going to just copy this rectangle down and set that. That's my title. Draw that object again, and now you have, hopefully bar chart is a title. And move it all the way down to the bottom of my window. And that'll be a good spot to copy this rectangle and get myself a curve for my bar chart. And the values here are sort of the same values as we used for the pie chart. It's just sort of a different visualization. So what's great about what Anish said is now I have them right here and I just bring them straight down. They're my values. Categories and the periods of things, and there's a lot that you can do to have all this stuff work. I'm going to use the same palette as I did for the other colors, just so it's visually the same. And then I'd like to just draw those objects and see what I get. Looks like I didn't get the values I wanted. Any idea why, Anish, that wouldn't pull two values there? Oh, I know.
I actually just got that too right now. I'm trying to figure out why. I think it's because, did you put two categories in there too? You need to put your two categories in there.
Just the range to 5,000. We're looking at two. There we go. My range was way too high. It was probably off the chart in terms of trying to find blue, which is only at 888. And if the range was up around like 10,000 or 20,000, you'd never see that blue. So 5,000 is a pretty good number for this because our total is about 4,000 or something. So that's just a way to keep things graphic. Again, if I went down to, let's say, 3,500, you'll see all those values sort of grow to the maximum. That's probably not enough to show all the variations. And let's go back and we can say, okay, we like the U and V. Now I'm in a position where I don't really need Grasshopper anymore. I'm gonna go back to my surface layer. I'm gonna turn off all those boundaries. I should also go and turn off sort of all the previews. I'm gonna select everything, right click and preview off. And I have a nice clean workspace. There are all my areas. Maybe I want to turn those off too. Right click, preview off. All right. I'm going to do a show command, and that's going to bring back my blue rectangle. I'm going to direct select this corner, and like I said, I'm going to twist this thing as much as I want. I'm also going to pull it vertically. You can see that everything changes all at once. And if I hide that, now I have this really sort of crazy looking twisting panelized wall with glass. And it's a 21.2 window to wall ratio. I can tell you exactly how many square feet of solid versus glass I have. And I can visualize that in many ways. I could even put these numbers on this bar chart if I wanted to, right? And you can start to add those things with the text HUD or some of the hidden features within some of those nodes. Let me just undo a few of those wild changes. Hide that again, and we're sort of off. And maybe something, in this realm is what you're looking for to do sort of some of the graphics or things like that. I think that's all I got. Anish, how'd I do?
That was good. Yeah, I mean, maybe we take a minute just to say, if anyone's following along, had questions, anybody
Yeah.
terribly lost? If not, we can keep going. Of course, we're going to post the script, we're going to post the video. So there's plenty of options there. So yeah, maybe I take over the presentation and I'll show you the next.
Nice.
Okay, so I took a different route with the thing. I don't know. I just did using different colors. But so what I also had this sort of idea about, we have these default things, but what if you had a sort of type of infographic that you wanted to make? And when you really think about it, the fact that you can draw geometry in Grasshopper, relate it to your data, and just really the fact that you have the ability to draw a mesh and draw lines on the screen means that you can basically draw anything. You can take your whole design, turn it into a diagram, and put it on your screen. So you can do all sorts of things. So it opens up a lot of that. But so what I'm going to show you guys is really, so this is overall what's controlling all the stuff on the left. But if I also wanted to have a single bar, just a bar that's a two-way slider that, if it gets bigger, like basically taking this pie chart and making it a long bar that you kind of see, like a power bar or something, right? So step one, just drawing a rectangle in your HUD sort of curve space, right? And then let's bring that into Grasshopper. I like using geometry. I don't know why Tom likes curves. Geometry and curves are all the same thing, but I'm a geometry man. And then let's explode this rectangle. I'm going to do a few things just based on the idea that I want to make something that you can just drop in any kind of rectangle. And so I'm going to regularize this rectangle to figure out what is the left side of this and what is the bottom side of this in relation to the screen. And you'll see how that comes into play later on. So I'm going to get the length of all of these segments, right? I'm exploding the rectangle to get all 4 segments. And let's get the length and then use the sort command and plug that in and sort these lengths from greatest to smallest. And then use that to concurrently, if you plug something into A, you sort the A in the same way that the K is being sorted, right? So now your segments are also being sorted from largest to smallest. So if we use list item and sort of look at what are we getting from this list, let's do a panel and just maybe let's do a slider because it's nice to have a slider and really look at this stuff, right? Get a slider, make it go from 0 to 3 so we can see all 3. Plug that into your eye. And now you can see the green is lighting up. So the smallest, and it's going to be tied with the other eye here, right? So the second one is going to be the same one, and then these two are also tied. So if we want to find the long side that's closest to the origin, which is like this one, right? Which is basically our bottom rail. We're going to make a midpoint. We're going to find the curved middle. Use curved middle. Plug these guys in there, and then get the distance. So we're going to just use point distance between the midpoint and our origin. And so where did we use? This origin is literally 0, 0, 0, right? So I can even just type in 0, 0, 0. That's our origin. So what is the distance to that? So if we then sort our list now by the distance to the origin, and then we sort these segments again, put that guy in there. Why does that not do it? Because I'm using list time. Sorry, I should use the whole thing. Get all 4 midpoints, right? You're trying to get all 4, sort them, and then so using that now, if we get this list item, let's take this list item guy over here and just use that. We can really see what's going on. Oh, that should be the list. That should be the item. So now, how is this organized? 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So, okay. So really, I want to get, it's that I want to, if we go back to this, I don't want to reverse this list. So now, if I do list item 0, basically I'm just getting the long side closest to the origin, right? So now I have that. And then I also want to find the short side closest to the origin. So let's also just use 0, right? So we have 2 lines. This one, oh wait, I gotta make 2 of these. At the end of the day, I just want the 2 corners of this rectangle, because then I can, let's see, gotta look, I'm doing my math here. So I basically now have an overall length of this long line, right? This guy. We're gonna get the length of it. Let's put it up here. And then we're gonna get the total square footage of our wall, which is the 2 numbers, right? It's this, you know, I have bigger ones because I use a different rectangle, but let's just do mass addition on that and just add these 2 numbers together to get the overall square footage. And then once we know the overall square footage, okay, what did I do? I gotta take a second here. Okay, so first, basically, I want to get a bar that is going to be our window, or let's start with the wall, right? The wall is nice and purple. So how much square footage do we have of our wall? And I'll just maybe get some panels here. Look at these numbers, right? Because we got these 2 numbers. It's nice to just have them. So I'm going to bring them all the way down here. Let me just make this better. We've got 2 numbers. So first, I'm going to take the overall number and divide that number by the window ratio or the wall ratio. It's 0.63, and so the overall length of this rectangle is like 313, right? But I want a rectangle that goes proportionally 0.63 of that. So let's multiply this length by this factor. And then let's just do, there's this fun little thing called, if you type SDL, it's line SDL. So let's get this little corner piece so we can start from that little corner. So that's, where do we go here? Or we could even use this, right? Because it's still the origin of that. Let's get the endpoints here. So the endpoints, and then the geometry, so we can see which one is the beginning. There's our nice little beginning point. So we're going to start here. And then the direction is going to be, let's make a vector that's 2 points and use this whole start and vector, right? So we know it's pointing now the direction of that long line. And then the length is our nice number, right? So now we have a nice line that is this number. So now we can extrude this curve that we have along our short line, which is this guy, right? So bam. Oops, why did it go that way? Maybe I need to flip this curve. Let's see if that helps it. There we go. All right, so now we have an untrimmed surface. And so if we take that and turn this into a mesh, oops, why is not, let's see. Okay, so then you have a mesh, and then you have to apply a color to this. This is a weird little thing about it, but it's kind of nice because we're going to apply our color palette, which was our little purple over here, right? Let's take this purple, plug it in there. And now we can use HUD mesh to draw mesh, and then draw that object, bring that into our whole overall thing, and bam, now we've got a bar. And that's just the first one, right? So now we really want to do another SDL for the next number, you know, so let's see, this was our second number, right? So we want to take the 36,000, divide that with it, and then so then, oh wait, no, wait, sorry. So, yeah, so we have the factor, and then we're going to multiply the length by that factor. And then, so that gives us our length. And then we'll do the SDL again, and we're going to make the length this new number. And then the S is now going to be the endpoint of this SDL, right? So we can take this endpoint, and now we have, you can see, oops, this guy. So this is a sliding point, and it's going to keep moving, right? So we want to then take that as our starting point. Now we have one that completes the bar, right? So then we're going to do the same thing. Well, first we want to bring this line over to this, right? So let's move that original little guy, this guy, right? We're going to move this guy over. And what's actually fun is that we can use the vector that we made with this guy, or no, we're not going to use that vector. We're going to use a vector that we make with this guy to move it. So we're going to use the start point and the end point and move it. Now we can do extrude curve, extrude this curve with this line. And again, I got to flip it. That's always fun. So we can take this, drop this guy in there, drop that guy. And then, you know, I need to make it the right color, right? Where is the, I need to use mesh color. So I gotta make this a mesh, plug that in there, and then we got my little teal. This teal. Bam. Bam. So now we have a bar, right? And I just, this is the most lowest common denominator thing we can think of, but just trying to think of just the idea that you can come up with your whatever, you know, ideas you have about your design and your project and how you want to present it, and really just be creative with the idea about, you know, how you want to show it. You know, maybe it just depends. And I think, you know, having that ability, just that basic ability of the line and the mesh really opens up so many things. So, yeah.
Yeah, a few ideas that I think Kate Ford and I were working on were in a building project where you could calculate the number of bike spaces you might need versus a ratio for a unit count on, let's say, a residential project or a dormitory project. You could calculate how many parking spaces you might need underground or on the surface level for a vast master plan with all types of different ratios per program, like office and residential, retail, and so forth. Whatever value that maybe is something to target, or maybe it's a question that always comes up in conversation that you're trying to target, that's something that you could always visualize on screen and create some sort of calculation to plug into the HUD. So I think creatively, and maybe there's a bunch of different things that we can put down on a list and say these would all be great things to visualize on this type of project, for example.
So any questions from the crowd? Anybody? Is anyone trying to do anything like this in their projects? Has anyone attempted this? Because I did do, I think I may have showed this in the group before a while ago, where I had a project where we had some images. Where's this stuff? Maybe I don't have it on this. I don't have it available right now, but you know, this all just started when I tried to use it, and Tom showed me how to use it, and it was pretty easy. And so I think, yeah, especially with the master planning projects, it was great to just be able to like pull it up all of a sudden and then just have this very dynamic conversation about it. I think this might be it. If it ever wants to open. Oh, somewhere in there. Bohan, have you used this at all? I know you do a lot of infographics kind of stuff, right? With environmental stuff. Well, I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, but it's a good question because we are definitely listening to all the things that you're saying in terms of feedback of these work sessions. It is sort of evolving based on your comments. This heads up display thing we thought was cool, but other people asked us like how to use that, and because they saw it a few times. So if there is something that you had in mind that you wanted to see in a future section, if there's an idea or a problem you're working through on your end, feel free to reach out, or we can put it as part of the working sessions. Anish, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're going to go through like a master planner version of this thing next, because that was something I was being asked about in the past.
Yeah.
And we'll keep going from there, and we'll keep doing these sessions as long as everybody finds them to be useful and fun. Oh yeah, there's your images. Those are cool.
Yeah, these are all just straight out of Grasshopper, just using like a white mode and having all the bars on there. And yeah, I just use a simple, or actually this one, yeah, I made the bars myself because it was just like a single bar chart, right? Like it was just, each one was individual and there's different types of parking. They want to be different colors, but maybe because I'm presenting on GoToMeeting, it's taking a hot minute to open up any of these. So
yeah, recording, doing Grasshopper calculations.
Yeah. And I might be messing up with my audio too. But yeah.
Very nice.
There. Okay, that's a sign for me to stop presenting.
Well,
is there anything that other people want to see, like for like things that are hot out there that people want to know outside of a master planner script? Good. Now we can make up our own agenda. We can do exactly what we want. Robotics is coming next. Just watch.
I have a simulator for the night sky that like you can put yourself inside of a sphere, and somebody has mapped every single star in our universe that we can see right from the planet Earth, and you can put yourself in there and sort of it'll start to like revolve and rotate, and you can see constellations that you'd never see probably from your point of view or our point of view on the planet. It is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It serves basically no purpose in the field of architecture, unless you're looking at the stars for some reason. But it is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, and I might just bring it up next time just to show how far out, quite literally, this stuff can be, and what people are thinking in terms of being creative with it. So this is a really baseline example, but it gets so strange, so quick, and so cool, in my opinion. So stay tuned.
Can I make my eggs and coffee in the morning?
I think we can print and laser cut like a Rube Goldberg machine, right? Have you done that like back in high school or something?
Yeah.
I have ordered cocktails from a robot. There's some pretty good cocktail shaking robots out there. But then I know there was like, wasn't there a robot restaurant in Boston too? Where it's
Yeah.
like you just walk up to a thing and they try to like, but it's just like, I think they just had bad recipes.
They didn't have good grasshopper scripts. That's what it was.
One thing I would suggest, um, again, thanks both of you for walking us through this stuff, because every time you see it, and especially when you're doing it live, without a net, it shows great courage. And it also shows a little bit of, it gives everybody a taste of the process. And one of the things that probably is daunting for people that haven't sort of rammed their head into this wall yet is all the little nodes that you remember to throw in at the last minute. The big chunks, big functions are easy enough to understand. It's all those little things that you need to throw in there to make them work, like flatten list or oh, here's the thing that's the thing that goes in there. Those are the things that are stumbling blocks for people. And starting with a routine that's close is sometimes the best way to learn. And then modifying that to something that's, that you want to try. But it is eye-opening and useful to see you guys go through this. And I'm in my head playing all the parallels of Dynamo, and it's neat to sort of get ideas from what you're doing and think of things that we can do also on the Revit side. So I just want to say thanks again for walking us through this stuff.
What is the Dynamo side like? Do they have a HUD plugin for it yet? Or is there anything out there?
I am not aware of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't one. But they're also at Dynamo 2.6. They've tied Dynamo now to the actual versions, or it used to be you could load whatever version of Dynamo you wanted. In Revit 2020, you now are tied to 2.5, and Revit 2021 is tied to Dynamo 2.6. So unless you have those installed, you don't see them. And I'm just gotten to the point where I've been rewriting the Dynamo routines I wrote for the 1.x versions and trying to redo them because the 2.0 was a huge rewrite and a lot of the nodes aren't really compatible. And then the people that write the add-ins are just still catching up to those. So you have to find replacements for those things that you had in your scripts. So I've got most of mine running in version 2 now, and then we got like 2.5. I hope that they're all still going to work in those higher versions. But a lot of the principles are the same. And I like your process of sorting all the lines and finding which one is closest. I've been through that. Somebody walked me through that once on a thing I was trying to do, and it's so different than what a lot of people are used to thinking about in terms of, it's a very different than a design process. It's a break it down. What is computational design good at? How do I use it? And as opposed to here's the thing I want to do, and how do I do it? Right. So a tough way to learn, which is the way I sort of have learned Dynamo, is starting off with something I want to do and then trying to do it, as opposed to looking at what the software does well and then evolving from that. It's a harder road. It's a running into the wall road. anyway, thanks again. Really, really fun to see.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I guess we're about an hour. Yeah, I'll post the recording and we'll go from there. Thanks,
Sounds
guys.
good. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Nish.
Peace.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See y'all later.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.